Thank you, Ash, for a great introduction. I told him that I was going to tell you all what I tell all my clients all the time and people I meet. Call me Melissa, please. Dr. Melissa Parks is great for marketing, and I do have my PhD in clinical psychology, but please call me Melissa. So I have to say that I've never done a talk in a nightclub before. So I might end up throwing out some funny things that maybe don't work, but because comedy is not my specialty. I do try to infuse my therapy with a tiny bit of humor because, I talk with people about sad things, but there's always room for a little bit of a sense of humor, but it's not it's not like my area of expertise. But I also wanted to thank all of you guys for being here because I know we planned this kind of at the last minute, and Web Summit is going on, mental health is not like the most exciting topic, but it's really exciting to me to see that for you guys there's something that's attractive about it. So like Ash mentioned, I'm a location-independent psychologist. That means I move around. I am based in Amsterdam, but I take my work on the road with me too. Before about 4 years ago, I was working a year and a half ago, actually, I was working just occasionally with clients online. And now I'm working with 100% of my clients online. And I actually, even though I'm based in Amsterdam, I have clients that are in Amsterdam that I work with online, just because it's a very convenient way to see a therapist. So today I wanted to talk with you guys about creating, like you saw in the title, creating your location-independent mental health toolbox. Not necessarily like fix you or solve all your problems or anything like that, but I do hope to kind of open your minds up a little bit to some ideas that maybe you haven't thought about to take care of your mental health and well-being. And then also I want to make sure we save plenty of time for questions too, so that I can really try to answer the questions that are relevant for your lifestyle. But to get started, to kind of explain a little bit, kind of introduce myself a little bit, and then also kind of explain to you how I got started on my own international lifestyle of sorts, and also kind of give you a peek at what I want to make sure we talk about today too. I want to tell you a little story. And the story goes kind of back 13 years of sorts, actually even farther than that, because I want to give you some background too. So I'm originally from the US. I grew up in the suburbs outside of Seattle, Washington, if you know where that's at, home of Amazon and Microsoft-ish, it's nearby. But I grew up in the suburbs. My family didn't travel that much. I hopped over to Canada a couple times when growing up. And then I went to university about 30 minutes from where I grew up. And that was really exciting to me. And I remember waving goodbye to my parents' house, like, oh, I'm never going to come back here. And then I came back for the weekend. And then I came back the weekend after that. And I basically would be at university and then go back to my parents' house. But for some reason, I really wanted to study abroad when I was at college. I just knew I want to go abroad. I want to experience another country. And that didn't make sense to anyone in my family because nobody in my family had studied abroad. Most people hadn't even been outside of maybe also to Canada, but it hadn't been farther than that. So my parents reluctantly agreed, okay, we'll let you do that, I guess. And so I signed up. I signed up for a really cool program with my university that was traveling around Western Europe for 3 months. So we basically kind of took the university with us. There were 2 professors, 30 students, and we traveled to 10 different countries. So we had classes in cafes and parks, and it was an amazing experience. And my plan was really that I was going to go study abroad for these 3 months, and then I was going to come back, and I kind of had a plan worked out of what I was going to do with the rest of my life, or at least like a 5-year plan of sorts. And because I'd already started studying psychology, and I wanted to go to grad school. But the first place we landed was Madrid, and I instantly fell in love with Madrid. And I remember the first week there, sitting in, if you've been to Madrid, you probably have been to Retiro Park in Madrid. And I remember sitting there with my new friends and talking to people from other countries and being in the beautiful Madrid spring weather. And suddenly I was filled with this kind of awakening of sorts, I guess, that I have to live here. And that totally blew me away. Like, oh no, this does not fit into my plan at all. How's this going to work? I don't know. But it became more and more apparent to me as I traveled throughout those 10 weeks that I absolutely wanted to move to Europe somehow. So I went back home. I started learning Spanish, and because I didn't want to just move to Europe, I really wanted to move to Spain. So I started learning Spanish. I kind of continued on my 5-year plan, and I started working at a children's psychiatric hospital after graduation. And thankfully, they allowed me to take a 3-month sabbatical to go and study Spanish more. So I was like, perfect, this is what I'm going to do. This is going to be my 3 months of living abroad, all on my own, and then I'll go back and go to grad school. And so I had it all figured out, and my family once again was like, what are you doing? This is so weird. Why would you want to do this? But I was getting everything ready. I got my plane ticket, found the school I wanted to study at. And then the day came to go to the airport, and my family dropped me off, and it was like very tearful goodbye, at least on their part. I don't think I was so sad about it. I was excited. I checked in, I went through security, and then suddenly I was hit by this huge wave of anxiety and fear and panic. And I responded in that moment. You know, when we're feeling fear or anxiety, we have alarm bells going off in our brain. It's like our fight, flight, and freeze mode. Our body's trying to figure out basically our brain is saying, this is dangerous. We have to get out of this situation. And so I responded to that. I called up my sister on a payphone, because this was before, cell phones existed, but I didn't have an international phone to call her up. I left my phone at home. So I called her up and I told her, you have to come pick me up. Like this, I have obviously made a huge mistake. My brain and my body are telling me right now, like, I need to go home. This was very foolish. And thankfully my sister, even though she didn't want me to leave, she talked me down and helped ground me in that moment and helped me to remind me of all the reasons of why I had made the decision for many months to prepare myself to go to Spain. And I got on the plane and I went to Spain for 3 months, and that ended up being a stepping stone to then later, that was also another kind of life-changing trip where I decided 3 months isn't enough. So I ended up going back a year and a half later, and then that was 9 years ago, and I've been living in Europe ever since. And as Ash mentioned, I'm now based in Amsterdam. There's a lot more to that story, and I'm happy to answer any specific questions you have, but I wanted to share this story because very often when my clients come to me, they tell me, okay, so I'm feeling really sad, or I'm feeling overwhelmed, or I'm feeling really anxious. I need to stop feeling that way. And that's not true. That is absolutely not true. What we know, and those things are not comfortable, and sometimes we want to reduce them a little bit. But the important thing in order for us to be able to live enriching and fulfilling lives, and for our mental health to not interfere with that, is not for us to get rid of thoughts like worries or imposter syndrome or uncomfortable feelings like anger or anxiety. That's not the problem. The problem is when those things hold us back from doing what's important to us. So basically this, what I wanted to talk with you guys about today is a kind of therapy that focuses on that. And then again, if there's something specific that you want to ask me about what I talk about, or something more related to your kind of your individual experience, or you're more than welcome to ask me, like raise your hand during the question and answer session, or you can come up to me later if you prefer to say something in private. So the first thing I wanted to talk to you about was this type of therapy that I do. That's called acceptance and commitment therapy. So it's a shortened, very summarized way to say that is ACT. That's what therapists refer to it as ACT. And it stands for, so what we want to do is we want to accept difficult thoughts and feelings and learn to be mindful around those types of feelings. So it's actually considered a mindfulness-based therapy because we're making space for these difficult things that can come up inside of us. And then the C is for committing to what's important to you. And then the T is taking action. So actually going in the direction of those things. So a lot of people at this moment are like, okay, so there's kind of two ways to go, right? And there are. this is something in ACT that they refer to as the choice point. So I was at that choice point moment when I was at the airport. It was like, okay, do I choose to get on the airplane, which is connected to my values and what's really deeply important to me, or am I going to be pulled away by all of the thoughts and feelings? All the things that are telling me, like, don't do this, anxiety, the fear, the doubt, what if this happens, what if that happens, are you really capable? All those things were pulling me away. Okay, so in that moment, I was able to go in the direction of my values, right? But what if you're not able to do that? In that moment, kind of my coping was calling my sister, and that's not always an option that we're going to have. So kind of the question is there, like, what do we do with that? And what I work with my clients on is helping them to learn tools to kind of what we call unhook or defuse from these thoughts and feelings. So basically, we're used to having thoughts and feelings come up, and we're used to being really stuck on them and really connected to them. And any thought that comes up, we kind of think of it as absolute truth, and we listen to it and we follow along with it. And basically, it's like if we were driving a car, it's like that thought or that feeling is the one driving the car for us. And ACT helps you to learn strategies so that the thought or the feeling is not going to disappear. You can't kick it out of the car, but you maybe can put it to the back seat. So I see some of you guys writing, which you absolutely can. Feel free to take notes and write. But I did want to mention too, I'm going to give a link to Ash tomorrow that's going to have more resources and kind of a summary of what I talk about tonight too. So if you don't remember, it's totally okay. Do you guys have any questions up until now? Because I feel like I've given you already a lot of information. So you're welcome also to interrupt me if you need me to repeat something or if something doesn't make sense. Okay, awesome. So I really like using acceptance and commitment therapy with my clients. I work with lots of digital nomads, expats, although I was just saying to Ash that not necessarily traditional expats, but people who have maybe gone abroad because they're remote workers, so kind of also digital nomads. But I think that we could get in a long discussion about the right vocabulary here, but really my clients are globally mobile people or global nomads. And so they're people who are living international lives. And as I'm sure you all know, being in this category yourself, there are a lot of stressors that come with this. We don't have specific research about digital nomads, but we do know more in the expat community. There's research showing that the expat community is at greater risk for struggling with their mental health than kind of the other population, the people who stayed back at home. And at the same time, too, it's something, the statistics are 20 to 30% of people had a diagnosable mental disorder last year, according to the World Health Organization. And 80% of people have had subclinical symptoms, which means that you don't fit the criteria for the actual diagnosis, but you might still experience anxiety, or you might still experience sadness, a little bit more extreme sadness, and mood shifts. So that's quite a lot, actually. So really, anyone could benefit from hearing about this. But of course, when you're living a life that's very mobile, when you've got family and friends in lots of different places, and I'm sure many of you are also running your own business too, which adds a whole other level of challenges and stressors there. There's a lot to work through. And I find that with my clients, one of the biggest challenges too is the fact that you're supposed to be living like a really exciting and cool life. And that's just kind of compounded by the fact that we have Instagram and social media and all, we're all supposed to put all our highlights on there too. So one of the things that I think is just really helpful for my clients to hear when they come to me is when I could say to them, yeah, that sounds normal. Because so often people come to me and say things like, oh, I'm experiencing a lot of sadness or a lot of loneliness or a lot of homesickness. And it's completely different when you are experiencing those feelings and you say to yourself, and something's wrong with me. So if you can say to yourself, I'm experiencing those feelings and that's completely normal and I'm not the only one who's experiencing that. So that's actually a big piece of acceptance and commitment therapy. That's the mindfulness piece. So instead of judging what's going on inside of us, acknowledging it and accepting it and making space for it. And that's really helpful to do. So thinking about this choice point that I was telling you guys about, I think there are a lot of different scenarios that we can run into where we have these choices. It can be something really big, like do I get on the airplane or not? But it can also be something small. For example, if you know that exercise is really helpful for you and really important to you, maybe, so that's kind of in the direction of your values, or like what you want your life to look like. Maybe it's self-care is one of your values, or maybe physical fitness, or being in nature, and so you like to get outside. And there's always going to be those things pulling you away, like maybe being tired, or being worried, like what if I don't have the energy for this activity today? Or what if my inner critic starts to tell me, or what if my inner critic starts to kind of beat me up about that I'm not doing my workout good enough? So again, those things are always going to be pulling us away from these things that we want to do that are really important. And we need skills to be able to unhook and to be able to, have these thoughts and feelings not drive the car. But we also need to know, what direction do I even want to go in? What are my values? What is important to me? So one thing that you can do, and there are a lot of things you can do to figure this out. Some people might have it figured out more than others, but one thing that's really helpful to do is to take some time either to reflect about it, or some people really enjoy writing and can do a lot of reflection that way, is to ask yourself, so let's see, like 5 years from now, 10 years from now, what would I want a really close friend to say about me? About like the kind of friend I've been, what's been important to me. And sometimes that can help us start to answer the questions of like, what things do I want to have in my life right now? What things do I want to prioritize? And usually when we realize what's important to us, and we often see some gaps between what we're living right now and what kind of the ideal that we want to live, that's when we also start to notice some of those things that are pulling us away. So I don't know if anyone can imagine something in their life, like some of those things that might be pulling them away from something that's important in their personal life or work life. I see some people nodding their heads, so it looks like, yes, there's some people that this is resonating with, so that's great. If anyone wants to share, you're more than welcome to share it. But I explicitly put in the description of tonight's talk that there's no reason to share, because I think these kinds of talks, it's really nice for it to be a safe space for people to listen, and you can share if you want, or you can go talk with people you know here afterwards too, if you want to, if you feel more comfortable talking in a smaller group. But just again, so you know. Did you want to say something?
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
When you're dealing with people who are presenting with a problem like you said about anxiety,
Yes.
When you were getting on the plane,
Yeah.
but it was very interesting that in your description of your family, you said that they've never been anywhere.
Yeah.
So consequently, I've recently become quite interested in the idea of self-limiting beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were telling that story, it seemed to say to me that you, at that point, had a self-limiting belief that you couldn't go abroad because your family had never gone abroad. Yeah. And if you go back and look at what caused that belief in the first place, then you can take steps to change it. Mm. Well, of course, I'm not a therapist, I don't know anything about this. But,
of course.
But it's just, I think it's quite an interesting idea. But of course, that involves going back and looking at what you think might have caused something in the first place. And the way that you describe therapy that you were doing is sort of more like on the here and now. Yeah. But sometimes, if you have normally with the self-limiting belief, it's subconscious. You don't know you've got it, so you don't know how to deal with it. You get stuck. Yeah. And so, Anyway, I wondered whether you could
discuss more about self-limiting.
Yes, or do you do that, or how do you deal with the problem if it comes up in that way? Yeah.
So yes. So absolutely, we all have beliefs like that are self-limiting, or just thought patterns that can pop up that are really get in the way for us, or that are unhelpful. And what you were saying is that you're completely right that sometimes we're not aware of those things. So absolutely becoming more aware of those is one of the first things that we need to do, because we can't observe what's going on inside of us if we aren't even aware of what's going on inside of us. So therapy can be really helpful to help you to identify some of those beliefs. What's different about ACT is that instead of saying like there's something wrong with having that belief, you start to just notice that that belief is coming up, and you can act towards it in a very accepting and compassionate way when you understand where it comes from. But some therapies do work on identifying kind of thought patterns that you have or beliefs that you have and work to change them or get rid of them. But what we find, so important thing to mention that I didn't mention is that ACT is a therapy that's supported by a lot of research, and even though a lot of people outside of the world of psychology haven't heard of it before, it's actually been around since the 80s as well. So it does have a long history. But one thing that's very different, for example, if you've heard of cognitive behavioral therapy before, that's a really common therapy that many people have heard of, or CBT. And that focuses on identifying your thoughts and then figuring out which ones are unhelpful or distorted, and then working to change them. I find that ACT works really well for clients because of the fact that it doesn't require you to change anything that's going on inside of you. And that's because very often when we come at ourselves with an attitude of, I need to change something about myself, we're kind of coming at ourselves kind of as an enemy a little bit of it. I mean, that's kind of a strong word to say, but a little bit more aggressive. Whereas mindfulness-based therapies are identifying, are working more on, instead of criticizing those thoughts, instead of judging those thoughts, instead of getting wrapped up with those thoughts, they're just letting you have the thoughts. And one way of thinking about it is like, instead of, you could have those thoughts be like clouds in the sky that are just floating by, and you don't need to grab them and hold on to them and overanalyze them, and you don't need to kind of carry them around with you. They can just come up, and that's okay. It doesn't have to mean anything, and they can float on by. I don't know if that answered your question, or if that brings up more questions from other people. But that is one. So again, the clouds in the sky, or leaves on a stream, these are kind of more traditional mindfulness techniques, but that work really well, and don't necessarily require you to sit down and do meditation. They can just be things that when you're going throughout the day, oh, there's one of those what if thoughts. Okay, I'm going to practice trying to just let it float on by. I don't need to grab it and analyze it and think what if. Another strategy that actually works really well too is, so if you think about maybe a self-defeating thought that you have related to work. So for example, all of us at some time have had like some kind of doubt at work. So maybe it's, I am not enough, or I'm not good at this, or I'm not capable. So take a minute right now and think about one of those that is kind of like your personal enemy there at work, in terms of, so a difficult thought you have about yourself and kind of like your ability at work, and try to actually sit with it. So don't have it be the cloud passing by. Just have it just kind of silently saying to yourself, so I am not enough, or I'm not a good therapist. You kind of notice how you feel, notice how your body feels. And now I want you to say the same thing inside of your head, but before that you say that phrase, say, I'm having the thought that. So I'm having the thought that I'm not a good therapist. And do you guys notice that there's a difference there when you say I'm having the thought that? So it's a very subtle difference, and this is just the first time, so you might not notice so much. But just that really small thing that we can do just by being able to label things, just by saying things like, this is a thought. We don't do that with our minds, right? We just, the thoughts are going. It's kind of like a record player, cassette tape, all this old technology here, but it's just kind of just going, and it's just going in the background. And that's really what we need to help it to do, is just be in the background, actually, and not have it be something that needs to kind of control what we're doing. So that's one thing we can do. That's kind of be thinking of these two. These are things you could put in the toolkit. So being able to say, I'm having the thought that. And we can do the same thing with feelings, too. It seems like something very small, but when we label the feelings that are going on inside of us, it's incredibly powerful. And actually, we know that on a physiological level, too, it helps to calm our brain down in that moment when we label the feeling. So saying something like, just being able to say, this is fear, or this is sadness, or this is shame. All of those things are actually really powerful to be able to do. But it's not our instinct. See, our instinct is that what our brain wants to do is to run away from danger and to run away from things that hurt. And that's really good when it's physical danger, right? Like if you touch a hot stove, you want to pull your hand away because otherwise you'll get burned. But if we feel sadness and we pull away from that, that actually creates bigger problems in the long run. And so what I do with my clients is help them to kind of ride the wave of that sadness so that it just lasts for a little while. It just lasts the amount that it needs to last, rather than pushing it away and pushing it away and pushing it away, and then eventually it comes back even stronger and you don't have the tools to deal with it. So there are also more meditative kind of techniques, which are actually, if you've ever practiced mindfulness meditation before, those are some strategies that you can use as well. There's one kind of idea that I really like to think about too. It's a sort of a metaphor. So if you imagine that we're all sailing ships throughout life, all of us have our own set of monsters that are like under the deck of the ship. And basically we have this agreement with the monsters that if we just kind of float around aimlessly, then they'll kind of stay quiet and calm and underneath. But there are other people sailing their ships, and maybe they're going in the direction of really exciting, great things, and we realize, I also want to do that too. And so we start, I don't sail, so I don't like driving a car, but this is a ship, and so we're sailing in that, we want to sail in that direction. And then the monsters start to get upset, and they come out from under the deck, and they have really big teeth, and they're snarling, and they start threatening us. I'm going to hurt you, you're going to get, this isn't safe, stop doing this, and all these different threats that they have for us. And so, we start to panic and get scared. And so what we do is that we go back to sailing around aimlessly. Okay, that was obviously a really bad idea. I don't want to disturb those monsters. But if what we can do is, again, we can just say, okay, the monsters are there. I can't throw them overboard. They're going to come up, but I'm not going to let them choose where I'm going to sail my boat. Then what ends up happening is that the monsters come up, but then we're sailing, the sun is out, we see the other boats, we see maybe some land over there, maybe we see birds flying up overhead, and we start to see that these monsters, okay, maybe they were using special effects, maybe they're actually not that big and scary, and they can't actually hurt us. It can be uncomfortable to have them on board, but the more that we don't let them sail the ship for us, the less power they have over us. That's another tool I use with clients. And then I want to, I would love to answer some of your questions too. So before we do that, though, I just want to wrap up with doing a short little exercise that's a self-compassion exercise. So all of this work with acceptance and commitment therapy is a very self-compassionate therapy. Because like I said before, you're kind of getting in touch with what's going on inside of you without needing to change it or fix it. You're coming at it with a very kind, open, and accepting way. And I find it to be really helpful for people to really kind of strengthen their relationship with themselves, which is important because, like I said earlier, with our lives, our international lives, we have so much changing. So really the constant is ourselves. So we really do want to strengthen that relationship with ourselves. And a lot of research is coming out about just how great self-compassion is. And usually people hear self-compassion and they're like, oh God, self-compassion, that sounds so like hippie and woo-woo. And well, actually, I think that people think that because it's really hard stuff. So that's like, self-compassion is this way, and then there's something inside of you that's like, I definitely don't want to go there. And it can be really difficult. And so, especially if it's something that if you grow up in a home where, or an environment where people didn't tend to act in very compassionate or kind ways with one another, then this is really uncharted territory and it can be really, really new and scary stuff. But with self-compassion, one of the things that they find that works really well, and again, it might sound a little strange, but it works really well, is figuring out some way that you can physically show yourself kindness. So this can be things like giving yourself a hug. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a hug because it's something you can do anywhere you are. So it can be something just like putting your arm around you like this, or putting your hand maybe on your chest, or resting your hand right here. they're also kind of more, sometimes people really like to wrap their fist like this and kind of put that on your chest too. Whatever you feel most comfortable doing and whatever works for you. You can have your hands resting on your lap. But actually we know that this produces oxytocin, which is this hormone and chemical messenger in our brains that actually helps us to feel more nurturing and kind and loving. So I'm not just making this up, and it's not just something that we're trying to ask people to do because it's fun. We know that it's actually really helpful. So one of the things that I first teach clients to do is something called a self-compassion break. And what that includes, it's the 3 different elements that make up self-compassion, which are mindfulness, common humanity, and self-kindness. So I am going to ask you guys to do the exercise with me today. So you can choose what you want to do. You can choose if you want to close your eyes. Some people don't feel comfortable doing that, so they just kind of look on the ground in front of them. But there is a part where I will ask you to do that kind of like self-hug or gesture like that. You can do whatever you want to do, whatever you feel most comfortable. But in order to do the exercise, you'll need to take a minute to just think about something that's going on that's been a little bit stressful. So if 0 is no stress at all and 10 is like the maximum amount of stress, try to think of something that's like a 3. Especially because this is probably the first time of doing something like this, so we don't want to like throw you into doing the most difficult thing. So something that's about a 3, but something that's been a little bit difficult for you in your personal life, in friendships, relationships, or at work too. So let's take a minute and just think about that, bring that thing to mind. And the first thing we're going to do is try to practice some mindfulness towards that. So you can say something to yourself like, oh, this is really hard. We can practice identifying the feeling. So this is sadness, or this is stress, or this is anger. And then we want to move into the piece that's the common humanity piece. So that's reminding ourselves that we're not alone right now. So that other people feel similar things. That there's nothing abnormal about what we're experiencing. And that again, that we're not the only ones that are going through this. And then this is the piece where you can do that self-touch, the hug, where you can, I really like to put my hands over my heart, and you can say to yourself, I'm going to try to be here for myself, or may I treat myself with kindness right now. This is a place where a lot of people get stuck. So sometimes it's helpful to think about, what would you want to say to a friend right now? Or what would you want a friend to say to you? So maybe you'd want to hear, I'm here for you, or I'm not going anywhere. Whatever it is that's coming to mind for you, just try to say those words to you right now. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes again. And most people, when we do something like this, they start to notice that they're a little bit uncomfortable in their chairs too. So feel free to like stretch out if you want to. One last thing that I want to say to you guys, actually 2 last things. One thing is that I've given you lots of new little tips right now, and this is just like just a little splash of what acceptance and commitment therapy is like. I'll have some resources that are on this PDF that I'll have for you. And there's some great books out there to learn more about it. Brene Brown's books are also awesome for just learning more about it, making space and accepting some of these difficult feelings. And she, in her most recent book, is focused on leadership. And she said that if she had to sum up what that book is about, one of the things she said was that it's about choosing the adventure of being brave and afraid at the same time. And I really like that because it really connects with the acceptance and commitment therapy. That again, we don't need to get rid of that fear. We can have the fear and uncomfortable stuff going on inside of us, and it doesn't have to hold us back from living very meaningful and enriching lives.